Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Healing Light, the Biological and Sociological Effect of Lighting. What we're going to do now is, after I give my introductions, we'll have a panel discussion with a moderated Q&A, and then these demonstrations will still be available for you after, if you want to go see the demonstration after being enlightened with this information, or if you haven't seen the demonstrations yet, they will be open after the panel. My name is Barbara Weinreich, and I am with the AIA Interiors Committee, which is co-hosting this event with the Social Science and Architecture Committee. The co-chairs of the Interiors Committee are Stephen Jacklich, who is here tonight, and Susan Link. And the co-chairs of the Social Science Committee are Nadine Berger, who's here tonight, right there, and Kwan-Ju Chen. Kwan-Ju was an organizer of this event along with Sean Fillion, who you saw in this room and who's back there, who is the lighting studio manager at RAB and director of the Masters in Lighting Design at the New York School of Interior Design, which is where I met him. And Bridget Hardiman is an alum of that program and an associate at Available Light, and also helped organize this program. So in addition to Sean and Bridget, the folks running the demonstrations, as you see, were A.C. Hickox, Jason Livingston in the back, and Bridget in the back here. So I just want to tell you a little bit about what our intention was here. But before I do that, let me thank the Center for Architecture, especially Salmata Kaba and Joe Corbin, and I'd especially like to thank the lead sponsor for tonight, which is RAB Lighting. So we're focusing on lighting in the interior, and the gestation of this program came about because every year we do a program on in the Interiors Committee on accessibility, and we started talking about lighting and accessibility. And when we realized also that architects have a certain limited knowledge of lighting, and that we very generally understand that it's used to light a material, or it's used to illuminate a task, or to create an atmosphere. But there's been so much great research done in terms of lighting and wellness, lighting and equity, lighting and agency, that we thought it would be worth it to have kind of an update on how we can know what we need to know about lighting as designers. So to that end, what we did is we decided to formulate the panel using an architect, a lighting designer, and a lighting researcher. And they're going to present, in that order, projects which exemplify how lighting is used for them, or the research they are doing in lighting. And after the panel, again, we'll have a chance to visit these demonstrations once again. So right now I'd like to introduce the panelists, and I'll introduce you all, and then JG, you'll come up. So the panelists are Jean-Gabriel Newcomb, the founding principal of J.G. Newcomb Architecture, Natalia Lesniak, who's a lighting designer at Lumen Architecture. I'm not going to read their whole bios, because I'd rather get on with the program. And Erica Voss, who is the founder and CEO of Good Lux. I just got, Erica, the pun in that. As I was writing this up, I was like, Good Lux. So excellent. Without further ado, I'm going to bring up J.G. Newcomb. So you should be, let's see if this works the right way. You should be able to just click. Yes.
Click away, all right.
And that's back and forth, right?
Thank you. All right,
okay.
Great. All right, hi, I'm J.G. Newcomb. Thank you, Barbara, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you, AIA New York Center for Architecture, for hosting the event. Thank you, Stephen Jacklich, for being the co-chair. Very excited to be here. This was, and thank you, Natalia, for putting me up for this. When I heard about it, I said, yeah, I would love to do that. I actually find in our practice, in almost every type of work that we do, and we do a lot of different kinds of things, lighting is something that we do fairly early on in the process, and it helps us sort of sculpt, articulate, develop a project. I find it actually a very super important lever to move a project forward in design, and obviously the results, I think, at the end are very interesting. So I'm going to show a couple of projects. The Suffolk, which is a residential building within the Lower East Side, opened last year. a townhouse that we completed a little while ago, and actually a pool space for a hospitality project that we did also about a year or two ago. And each one of them very, very different kinds of projects. So I was trying to find things that might appeal to residential architects, commercial architects, whatever. And each one of them sort of highlights a different kind of topic. So I'm going to start with the Suffolk. It's a Lower East Side project. Datner Architect was the architect of record, did the core and shells. Beautiful exterior. I'm not going to show it. But I wanted to start with I'm going to show the lobby, amenity space, and the gym just in quick succession. I only got about 10 minutes, so I'll try to get through this. This for me, I just want to say, we will start with the design for a project and get to a certain point, and pretty much towards halfway and towards the end of schematic design, we will start to talk about lighting. And I put this image up here in particular because, the partie was, I'm not going to say it was simple, but it was a relatively simple idea, which was, create this, soft barrel vault that goes through the space, use the program to cut into it in these sort of, unpredictable ways. So, okay, great, so we got that far. And then I said, well, now what do we do? I said, well, we want to light it. And I'm going to say on every single one of these projects, the game is generally try not to put too many downlights, or as few as you can, because for me at least, and I'll let you guys discuss whether you like that or not, but I just find the downlight's really not the nicest, the kind of a blunt tool for lighting, right? So there's that, I forgot, there was a lighting designer years ago, he said the three types of lighting is you have some downlights, cove lighting, and then some decorative fixtures that provide these three different kinds of lighting, and I think we generally try to do that in all of our projects. So here, you can see we do need a little bit of downlighting, so we put those in the corners of these arches. We obviously sculpted, where there's an entry into the elevator bank, we sort of pulled down the ceiling, created the light cove, and obviously designed, these custom fixtures to sort of work with the space and articulate it. And I think all three of these things working in concert make for, hopefully you agree, an interesting space. A couple of more views, I also kind of fun to bring in some lighting. We did the art curation on this project, so we brought in an artist who helped us with the neon in the back there. But I think, I was thinking about Carlos Scarpa and reflective surfaces and trying to get some light in and how you bounce that in. But I think the same's happening with the light fixture, which I thought was a nice move. So really thinking on that level towards the end of the project, we'll still be thinking about that, even though we're also very much at the beginning of the project. Here's some other views. So here we're pretty blessed with very decent natural light. So we also like to use that as much as possible, obviously. For the amenity space is a very different kind of space. So here I want to talk a little bit about more non-traditional uses of lighting. So obviously, we have very, very few downlights. On the top left, there's a sort of series of metal panels that we're lighting through. And, we started with that, and I did a detailed reviews before, and I thought it was kind of interesting the way that the light sort of reflects off, expanded metal mesh or perforated metal. We had that on the top left, and it obviously some custom downlights, some custom pendants, and a little bit of cove lighting. There's a big feature stair on that's the center of this big space. But what I really wanted to talk about is these column covers, right? So we use this metal mesh around these column covers. That is a source of light, right? So our goal is, how can we light the space without lighting the space, right? So a lot of times we'll do it in the bookcase. We'll put lights towards the back of it that you can't see. Wherever we're doing this, we're really trying to hide the source of the light. Nobody wants to look at light, and hopefully, if you're architects, most of you know that. But again, the combination of natural light, pendant lights, a couple of downlights, recessed lights, that the whole thing starts to tell kind of I think on the lighting side, a fairly complex story. Even in the rear, we have these little study carrels where we did, these nice Allied maker sconces. Just gives like a nice little punch at the end. Here's some other views. We have these long library tables, so we design these, these little spaces. Obviously, where you're sitting, working. And a lot of this has a little bit of a, work from home situation. These long tables where people can congregate and they have their own space, but we use that to really kind of define this pool of light on the table. So another layer, so we went beyond the three. And just, a detail of the column cover, which I was shocked didn't get VE'd, so that was great. This detail on the left it's a bit whimsical. It's a metal screen that goes above the backsplash at the pantry kitchen. And again, we did it as an opportunity. Yeah, we we could do a cove, and we have a cove, but the way that it hits that becomes a little bit of a signpost to get you back to that space. It's, again, very, what I would call a non-traditional way of lighting a space. And we do this in concert with our friends, the lighting designers, who know a lot more about this than I do. I'm just the teaser portion of this. These guys really know stuff. And here, just on the rear, and I'll move forward quickly, but on the rear, we kind of created this, we had a column we had to negotiate, and then we created this kind of ghost partition, again, that has light in it that kind of helps seal off that space without sealing it off. We like ambiguity a lot. Custom fixtures, this is the gym. Most commercial amenity gyms, not super exciting. They're okay. There's good ones. There's good ones. There's less good ones. Here we really, again, lighting absolutely fundamental to making this an interesting space, or maybe a little bit above average. And we were working. This is Essex Crossing. A lot of great projects there. So we had to do something that really stood out. I actually looked at the Plaza Hotel for this mirror detail, just the way that it lights the back wall. You don't really see any fixtures, but the whole wall is illuminated. Again, I don't even know how many. I don't even see any downlights, so we did something right. For me, that's a success. So the whole thing's very ambient. There's a lot of nicely scaled windows. Datner, fantastic to work with, really a pleasure. And the scale of what they did was really terrific. So that's the Suffolk. So that's project one. One project, a lot of different strategies, and again, if we're not doing this early in the process, I don't think you can get to this point, and it's pretty critical. Switching gears a little, this is a townhouse we did. Obviously, a lot more. Actually, I'm showing a very minimal portion of the townhouse. There's a lot more detail, a lot more materials, but I'm just going to focus on the stair for a couple of minutes. Same MO, which is just really try to minimize downlights on stairs in particular. It's really difficult because you need to illuminate the stair. You need to not kill yourself walking down or up. So a strategy we used here was integrating the light into the handrail and doing a cove that just wraps up this 4-story building. Very, very simple. We have 2 downlights, 1 at each landing, and that's it. That's how we lit the stair. It was like the most efficient means. I want to do a side note, not super related to this panel, but I will say one thing. If you are a residential architect, you'll notice when you invite a photographer over to shoot your space, the first thing they'll do is turn all the lights off, because that's really that's what editors at places like AD and Decor are looking for. So that's interesting, and makes it hard when you do all this work to show it. So I took these photos, but even I kind of toned down the lighting. It's interesting, we had a recent townhouse project that we're working on. We started talking about lighting early on, and the client said, I'm really not into cove lighting. I just think it's a little commercial. So just think about your audience, right? That's actually, I was surprised to hear that, but I got what she meant, because that's what the media is feeding. So again, that's a little bit of a sidebar, and ask me questions. But again, a lot of great natural light, the detail and how the little, antique bronze detail got made was a whole story in itself. That was quite complicated, but just this soft line that brings you up. That's it. It's a visual line that brings you up your little townhouse. Here's some other details. Here, just at the entry, we worked with an artist such on Mercer Street, not far from here, Michelle Akadonner. It's a 12-foot cast bronze doors, but I'm just showing because it's really, I like it, so I'm going to do that. But also the way that the light hits this, and think about the reflectivity of the materials when you have natural light. That is a form of lighting, right? That's something we're thinking about. We have on the left, I'm showing that image just because it's a sort of a lightly antique mirror. It's pulling a little bit of light off the staircase and off the front windows. So again, all of these things contribute to this idea of lighting. And switching gears again, well, here's the one I was saying. So here, this is a photo, we reshot the project. And the bookcase is quite beautiful. It has all these really tiny little LEDs, and it's lit up really nicely, but when the photographer reshot it, just turned them off. And I have photos with it on, but I just want to say, this is what's expected in high-end residential, so it's a different world. All right, definitely switching gears back into, this is a commercial, so a hotel project. And I'm going to end with this. Pools, for some reason, we ended up doing a lot of pools over the years. Pools are super hard. I don't know if anyone's here's worked on pools. They're very difficult. Obviously, acoustics, very hard to keep the noise down. If you have a lot of money, it's even then it's not that easy, but if you, I don't know how many of you have budgets, but I usually have budgets, very hard to keep the noise down. And extraordinarily hard to light, because if you're in a pool, what you don't want, you're doing the backstroke, I don't want to see those lights, right? Like just looking up here. It's painful. So you have to really figure out a way to light all of the surface, and it's a lot, in a way that doesn't blind you, or that's pleasing, right? That's soft, as subtle as you can make it. So my team and I developed this idea of these fan shapes, and the idea was multifold, right? So on the one hand, we're plastering some of these blades with an acoustic plaster, not all of them, and we're also creating these long coves in there, which helps break up sound waves. But obviously the main feature was to do like long linear coves that just kind of glow. Yes, they're still reflected in the pool, but it's not quite as harsh as a downlight hitting the light, right? And last slide, it may have been under 10 minutes, that's great, all right. Last slide, that's Shanfei, she's in the audience here. Yeah. This was our assault room, and again, no downlights. It is just it's shot a little bit brighter than what it really is on the screen, but the idea was just, here just using coves, so sometimes a mono solution is just fine, it just depends on what you're doing, right? But it's nice to know all of the tools that you can have at your disposal and how to mix and match them, right? These are three different projects with a lot of different lighting solutions. So this was actually a great talk for me, because I didn't have to prep. I really enjoy this, and I actually just put some images together and was like, yeah, this is what we did. It's very straightforward. So I would like to bring Natalia up, and thank you.
All right, thank you, Jean. It's always nice to hear you talking about your projects and also lighting. Oh, you do have. All right. So the reason we care so much about lighting is because a lot of us spend most of our time inside, whether it's at home or at work or in transportation. So what can we do with the light, electric lighting, to improve our spaces and also improve our well-being while we're at it? So I'll start with this project. This is Poster House. It's the first dedicated museum for posters in the US. This is the exterior entryway, and the architectural design is by LTL Architects. And the space has divided with a long diagonal to separate the gallery space and the kind of public passageway, which houses the retail area, kind of a reception coffee cafe, and a multi-use educational center in the back. And we have a number of layers of light in this space to address the general ambient light and as well as task and focus light. So something that the architects focused on a lot in this very long and narrow space was to bring some brightness. We didn't have much daylight. It was long, almost 200 feet long, and relatively narrow. So they did their best to really salvage and restore as much of the existing architecture as possible. This is the former TechServe space on 23rd Street. Some of you might have been there before it was transitioned into a museum. And in the existing space, I think you can, does the laser work right here? Here we go. We have terracotta vaults, and we weren't able to puncture those. So with the team, we worked out a strategy that would highlight the architecture, but also provide enough general ambient light for the space below. So the way we were able to do that is with a linear LED mounted on this tension-mounted metal strip to uplight each of the archways. And it's kind of amazing, they all stayed as a backup. We kind of had in mind that maybe we'd cut every other one out, but luckily we didn't have to do that. And on this other side, what you see here is this canopy extending over from the gallery side, kind of creating this space in between the two. And the idea between the two spaces was really to mimic a little bit the way posters are with architecture, that they can be both commercial and very artistic. So our gallery side and our retail commercial side. So in this canopy that extends over from the gallery, the architects created a kind of a very unusual, different condition where the ceiling kind of torques and twists as it spreads out. You can see it a little bit more in this image. And it was a beautiful kind of textured, concrete-like gray finish, but quite a challenge to light from. We didn't want to do the same uplight strategy, so we worked with them to figure out a fixture that wouldn't be glary. So the way we were able to limit glare in this condition is choosing a fixture that had a dark interior reflector, and a hex louver. This way we were able to limit the light that would be a stray light from the fixture. Because when we have sort of dark surfaces and bright points of light, it can be quite uncomfortable. Here's another look on the space from the other side, from the north, from the 24th Street side. It's a kind of a display and educational nook area with a couple of interactive displays. And we have a large display case for much larger posters. It was kind of a challenge posed to us. So the architectural team asked us to keep the existing brick and ceiling clean. We didn't want to put lights that we would be uplighting. That would just be a strange scenario. So we worked with them. All right, what's the largest or smallest display case where we could include the lighting from within? Because we couldn't backlight the posters. They're mostly archival, so that wasn't a possibility, sometimes with text on the back, so they all had to be front lit. So we had to think about how can we light this space without this space evenly, without blinding people who are sitting, but more importantly also walking by in this relatively narrow space. So we were able to do that by doing kind of two layers of louvers and baffles. So louvers, so my arm is the light, louvers in between each optic, so as you pass by, each one was shielded, and then along the parallel, a baffle so that folks who were sitting and walking by here, their vision was also shielded. So all the light was contained and focused on the posters. I just wanted to share this because I'm a big fan. This was the inaugural exhibit with posters from Alphonse Mucha. So that's just something fun I wanted to show. And we have, I'd say, traditional museum gallery lighting with snoots and glare control where most of the lighting is focused on the artwork. And in this particular case, since these are archival posters, it was important to actually keep the light levels low. I don't know if it tells you anything, 5-foot candles. So it was important to, because light, even if it doesn't have UV or IR content, it is still electromagnetic radiation, so it can still deteriorate papers or feathers, fine archival work. So we work with the museum to figure out what light levels would be appropriate for the kinds of work that they'll have here. This is another different kind of project type. This is an office. It's kind of a unique space designed by Schweitzer Group. This is a multi-story project that houses 3 nonprofit offices, and it's staffed by and services people who are neurodivergent, are on the autism spectrum, and have migraine tendencies. So those kinds of folks, we're all sensitive to light, but I know from my friends who suffer from migraines, they're particularly sensitive to flicker or bright lights. And also for this group, it's important to have control over the lights in their space to be able to adjust the light levels. The other important part of this office space, when we were talking to the architects, was to help create a space that was a little bit more, had a more residential feel. And part of that was not just in their choice of palette with a lot more woods, color, and bringing in all this amazing planting. It was also bringing more decorative lighting. How could we take decorative lights and actually have them serve as that main architectural, general ambient layer of light? So we worked with them to find a balance in decorative architectural fixtures that can provide enough light for the space, not be too glary, but also be controlled and dimmed well, which is not always the case. Sometimes decorative fixtures are made more for the looks, but not so much for the performance. One more thing I wanted to add. In terms of control and accessibility, this is a smaller open office areas, but we had larger areas where we broke these globe pendants down into smaller groups so that on the wall there were keypads that folks who were working there could adjust the light levels individually. And in addition to that general layer, we had task lights. One of the days that I went there for punch list, some of the staff had already moved in, and actually in one corner of the building they had just turned all the upper ceiling lights off, and just a few folks used task lights. So I think as much as it's important that we provide light, we should also provide the capacity to turn lights off and provide variations, because having a perfectly even flat plane of light can be a little tiring, so that variation is important. Here we have a seating area, and this is something that I was talking about with Erica and Jean when we met just before, how important it is to provide light on walls and vertical surfaces. So that's what we try and do, either include niches or nooks where those vertical surfaces are illuminated, because that's really how people perceive spaces. It's not really looking down, but kind of this, I don't know, 10, 15 degree arc that we're looking at. So what we do with our walls is so important, whether you use a recessed light to aim towards them or place a decorative lamp nearby. Lighting those vertical surfaces really helps kind of open up a space, but also delineate it as well. And here I just wanted to show that even with the decoratives, we were able to find fixtures that had, when there were strong, bright sources, they would have baffling or snoots to kind of limit that stray light. And here are two more examples of how we balanced kind of that perimeter light with either recessed lights or decorative pendants. This is a third project, a coffee shop. It's a neurology-inspired coffee shop called Honey Brains here in New York, designed with Vamos Architects. And the main point of the Honey Brains is to really feed the body and mind. So they have healthy food, honey, raw food diets, live-streamed lectures. This was a really fun project to do because they actually said, hey, we want the lighting to also do that, also be supportive of the body. So this was a really great opportunity. It was amazing because this particular space had great daylight access. They have a few other shops that are kind of the reverse proportions, with a very tiny storefront and a long, deep entryway. So having where the lighting becomes almost a more important element. But what's important about this coffee shop is it's not just a coffee shop, it's also an office space for a lot of people. In the evening, it's a lecture hall. And some folks come for a few minutes to get their coffee or a snack. Others stay there for a few hours working off of their laptops. So it's a space where it is important how much time we spend there. So what does that mean for the lighting? Also, we have the staff who are there for a long period of time. So we were able to work with them, and this is a project that looked at early circadian supportive lighting. So what does that mean? We found fixtures that had a full spectrum, that had a lot of content in all the colors essentially. So blue, green, red, unlike incandescents, which kind of have a lot of red, content, or traditional LED chips, which maybe you'll see in the other demonstrations that have a peak in the blues and then a big hump. They look a little bit like a camel. So these fixtures had a more broad spectrum. A little bit, they were trying to emulate daylight. So how do we share that information about spectrum and color change over the course of the day to the people who are installing the lights, programming them? There are two ways that you can help to visualize this, either with a graph or a chart. And the elements that we share here that are important are CCT, so the color of the light, is it cool, warm, the light level, how bright it is, as well as circadian stimulus. And circadian stimulus, CS, is, sorry, keep hitting the mics. Circadian CS is one of the metrics developed by the Lighting Research Center up in Rensselaer. And in this particular metric, there's another one that the WELL system uses that Erica will talk about, melanopic EDI. So in circadian stimulus, you want to provide bright light in the morning during the day. Not so different from daylight. When we're outside, we get bright light, and in the evening, it's dimmer. So for this particular metric, you want to achieve at least 0.3 CS in the morning for people who are regular day shift folks. And in the evening, you want to go down to a much lower light level, so you don't want to be stimulating the circadian system. And you don't have to just look at this as a dynamic system. The same thing can be achieved with dimming. You don't necessarily only need to use a tunable approach, but we were fortunate in this system, in this project, to have the budget and the interest from the client to do this. But does it make sense to use it in all the fixtures? No, not necessarily. So here for the decorative walls, the perimeter, and the millwork, we used static, warm white lights to highlight the honey, so that looks beautiful in the walls. And I love this detail. Nelson came up with this idea. We were looking at all these expensive, the architect had come to us with these beautiful cast forms glass forms that resemble honeycombs or dripping honey, and they're all just outrageously priced. And what we ended up doing is taking bubble wrap, sandwiching it, and it kind of gave that same effect. And from far away, like, even up close, you can't tell. It's quite funny how you can kind of switch materials to still get a similar effect. We also worked with them, since the lighting system in the ceiling were really socket-based lamps and didn't have any shielding and control. So this is where the collaboration with the architect was important. How could we use the ceiling to create our shielding system and limit glare, but still have a large enough aperture to get the light out while mimicking, kind of referencing honeycomb. So this was a beautiful collaboration result. It was a lot of fun. So thank you to Erica.
Okay, so I'm here to really focus on the research and science perspective. My background is actually I got a bachelor's of architecture, so I kind of funneled more niche and more niche. So bachelor's of architecture, master's in lighting, career in circadian lighting. So like I'm really far down that trail. But what I want to talk about, I'm not going to show any projects. For the last 6 years, I've really focused most of my energy on educating lighting professionals, lighting manufacturers, lighting agencies, really anybody who's working with lighting from a wellness perspective and doesn't understand it, which is most people. How do we make that education more simple? How do we make it more approachable? How do we apply it? So I'm gonna, in a few slides, give you some strategies. So no projects, but I'm not gonna get deep into the science. I'm assuming that we're all on board with the idea that light is really important for wellness. I'll give a few key facts about it, and then we'll jump right into the strategies. So, the natural light cycle is fundamental for healthy circadian rhythms in our system. 43% of our genetic expression is actually tied to our circadian rhythms. So how likely you are to express a disposition towards cancer, towards certain chronic illnesses is ingrained in your genetics. If you have a healthy circadian system, you're less prone to turning those genes on. And if you don't, you're more prone for those things to go haywire. Every cell in our body has its own clock. So we are really just a huge walking clock. And that is why every cell in our body has its circadian rhythm. So when we talk about light, which is the most important time giver to your brain, it tells your brain what time of day it is. Is it daytime and time to do daytime activities, or is it nighttime and time to do nighttime activities? Every cell is responding to that. And in the same vein, every organ system also has its own clock. So it just scales up, and you have a master clock in your brain, and that is what we talk about when we talk about circadian lighting. How do we create lighting applications or strategies that get light to your eye? Because what you're really trying to do, the sensors that are related to the master clock in your brain are in the back of your eye. So what we really want to do from a wellness lighting perspective is bring light to our eyes. So traditionally, right, our status quo for architectural lighting is light levels on a task plane. How much light am I getting on this podium horizontally? On the floor if it's circulation. But as Natalia mentioned, we are vertical surface creatures, and more so than ever when you think about laptops and looking at luminous screens. The way we perceive our environment, even without those things, is in the vertical. So this metric that has been used and that we use as lighting designers and architects really is one way that we understand, kind of contrast and if we're providing enough light for safety, but it really tells us nothing for wellness. The paradigm shift is really in that we want to focus on vertical light levels. Now, the IES does have vertical light level recommendations, but they typically are, if you've worked with them at all, you'll know it's for lockers, it's for whiteboards or accent areas. But when we're talking about wellness lighting, we want to know to the best of our ability how much light is coming at that person's eye. And so for visual comfort, most light sources in the ceiling are designed to not throw light in your eye because that's uncomfortable. So this is kind of where we're at a little bit of a challenge, because lighting from the ceilings is not very effective, especially with downlights. Downlights are notoriously difficult because you don't want them to be glary, so you point them on the floor, therefore you're not getting a ton of light in your eye. And that sort of agreed upon average height is 4 feet above finished floor. So that's when we're talking about wellness lighting, vertical light at the eye, whereas with horizontal lighting, we're really thinking about floors, tables, a totally different orientation. And in general, what we find is that if you're just measuring a typical architectural lighting strategy, you're only getting about half the light that you need to your eye, right? Most of that light is falling on horizontal surfaces. So in my time working on application and strategy, I kind of came up with this acronym that's super helpful for me as a designer, and I think helpful for any designer to think about. So wellness lighting is just a layer. I think that's one of the things that I want you to take away from this, is that it's not a new whole way that you have to think about how you're designing. It is adding, it's looking at and analyzing what you are doing in a slightly different way. So first, we care about vertical light at the eye. I don't know if I can. Okay, so we want vertical light at the eye. That's something that we normally don't really take into consideration. We want to really do our normal lighting strategies first and then measure those and see, okay, how are we doing? The next part we're going to look at is intensity. So intensity is light levels. Those are the foot candles or lux. You still want to be mindful of your horizontal light levels. Those are tried and true. There's so many studies that have been done on visual acuity and comfort in the horizontal plane, but we then also want to look at that vertical illumination. Timing. So this is really important. Some spaces, and this is where lighting really helps with timing, because it does help to convey that sense of change over time. And lighting controls also helps with that. So what are the hours of occupancy? Is this a daytime only space? Is this a day to night space? Is it a space where people do shift work? Those are all things that you want to think about early on, because that will tell you how dynamic your light needs to be or does not need to be. A is for appearance. So we're still keeping in mind what you would do for standard architectural lighting. Color temperature, how warm or cool is it? It should work with your materials. Is the CRI where it needs to be? Is the color rendering, bringing the whatever colors you're using in your design to life? An R9 is, really good for skin tone. It brings out the reds. And so that's another one of the metrics that you don't want to only focus on wellness. You still need to maintain the color quality that you would have with architectural lighting. And location. So as Natalia was mentioning, those vertical surfaces, that is it's great for wayfinding. It's great for bouncing light into someone's eye in a comfortable way. It's great for highlighting surfaces. There's so much opportunity in vertical surfaces. That is the first place I go whenever I'm thinking about wellness lighting and I see a space or someone asks me, can you analyze this? Can you look at this? I'll say, what are your opportunities for vertical light or surfaces to light vertically? And then spectrum. And spectrum's the most technical, and I will not get into the details of spectrum, but I would say it could potentially have a very big impact, allowing you to use less light if you have a very specific spectrum for daytime and also for nighttime, like Natalia was saying. So high level, the cooler the light source, the better it is for daytime, and the warmer the light source, the more efficient it is going to be at providing proper nighttime signals to your body. So really, I also want to address kind of the lighting equity aspect of this. So wellness lighting is really for everyone and anyone. This is not just for NICU babies. This is not just for night shift nurses who've been, doing night shifts for 20 years. The research, I didn't put the slide in, but it shows that, 80% of day working people have some form of circadian disruption. So that means 80% of just the people who have regular 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever your time is, 7 to 7 jobs, are experiencing circadian disruption, which is increasing your risk for illness and chronic disease. So really, you want to consider all occupants. Who's using the space? In a hospital, I've done lots of NICUs. I always go to the kitchen staff or anybody who is in the back of house space that is working their entire daytime and have no windows. Those people are people, and they need wellness lighting more than anyone else probably, because they literally have no access to daylight. So it doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be complicated. So that's one thing that I think it doesn't have to break the budget, truly. I think the biggest barrier to entry is the novel technology perception on the contractor's end. So you will see price increases for products simply because they don't understand the technology, even if the controls are still 0 to 10 dimming and just intensity. So don't overlook the back of house spaces. They're still super important. And so how much light do we need? Do we want? What's happening? We want to think about how much light we're getting in the day, which is from the time that you wake up until your evening hours, which is 2 to 3 hours before bed. So you need to kind of know when you would like to go to bed. I have 3 kids, so I go to bed way earlier now, but when I didn't, I was a hardcore night owl. So, 1 o'clock in the morning, my bedtime usually. I love to wake up at 9 a.m., but that's socially not easy when you have a job. So, but be realistic. Be realistic about what your bedtime is that you think you can achieve, and start winding your body down 2 to 3 hours before bed. What's interesting is that the daytime, when we think about architectural lighting, in the daytime, when we wake up, let's say we have 30-foot candles. It's just like a standard horizontal light level. 2 to 3 hours before bed, let's say you're still at work, you worked late, still 30-foot candles, right? Your body's getting a meh amount of light all day long, and probably too much light at night. You've got this 1-to-1 ratio, so your brain's saying, okay, it's sort of daytime, and it's not quite nighttime, so I don't know what to do. What research shows, and this is the source to the paper, and this is a group of photobiologists from around the world who published a paper, I'm trying to think, maybe in 2022, that looked at all of their research over the last 20 years, and what they have found is sort of the appropriate transition from daytime light signals to nighttime light signals for your brain. And so I'm not getting into the details of the metric, but what's really an important takeaway here is that during the day, what we really need, and all of these various researchers are in agreement in this, is 250 melanopic EDI. This is what the Well Building Standard now cites, so they're up to speed. Tim Brown is one of the authors of this paper. And so when we think about that, and we look at the evening hours should be 2 to 3 hours before bed, 10 melanopic EDI, that's a 25-to-1 difference. So what we get is 1-to-1. What we need biologically is 25-to-1. When we have 25-to-1, what we find when we get sufficient daytime light levels is that it actually doesn't, the light at night has much less of an impact on your body. If your body has clearly been given, your brain has clearly been given a daytime signal, at night, your iPad, your TV, your home light levels are completely sort of a non-factor at that point. So if we can get sustained daytime light levels of 250 melanopic EDI, we would be doing so much good for our bodies in our interior spaces. So that gets into kind of what does that mean for applying that. So there's 3 ways that I like to think about wellness lighting. There's the simple approach, really truly simple. Most daytime spaces, let's say 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., it's just a daylight strategy. So you don't need to go from, if you don't want to, you don't need to have color tuning. You don't need to go from warm white to cool white. it's beautiful, and I think that there's some value in having that experience as a person in the space. But biologically, if you can sustain your 250 melanopic EDI during those daytime hours, that's medical clinics, right? I mean, healthcare is a broad market. Hospitals are particularly tricky, but medical offices, dentist offices, outpatient clinics, I mean, so many places where people, infusion bays, right? People who are getting chemotherapy. There's so much opportunity. Schools, our offices, so many spaces where you could just look at a simple static strategy that's providing a higher daytime light level. And that doesn't mean that you have to blast it with a ton of light intensity. It means that you have to pay particular attention to where you place the light, that whole VITALS acronym. The moderately complex approach is when you get into places where people sleep, because that is where you really want to provide that wind down period 2 to 3 hours before they go to bed. So in senior living facilities, in hospitals, in places, if people are sleeping there, you're gonna want something that has a much warmer color temperature for night. And that means that you are, from a controls perspective, going to be changing color temperature and intensity. So it's moderately complex, but still very doable within the tunable technology that exists. And then shift work is the most complex, because there's people who do there's 3 shifts, there's 4 shift applications, and you really have to talk to the team directly. When I have worked with shift work clients, it has to be tailored to kind of who's doing what and what is the bulk of the occupants doing during that time. But I think the biggest takeaway from this is that 80% of what is done falls into that simple bucket. And so this idea that we can't afford, or that circadian or wellness lighting is too difficult, I don't buy it. It doesn't. It is something that can be done. I've seen it. I've done it. But it is something that requires education. So that's it. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of hope and excitement that is something that you can integrate into your projects, and it would be great to see more of it happening out there.
I'm going to start off asking a couple of questions, and then we can open it up to you. As you can see, when we fashioned this panel, there are like so many directions it could go in, right? So we really figured, I'm sorry, Eric, I'm going to talk to your back, but don't worry. The reason that we structured it the way we did, starting with an architect and then going to a lighting designer and then a researcher, is because I think JG represents, how most of us who are designers approach this first, right? I mean, it's really about atmosphere, ambience, making a beautiful space using beautiful material and beautiful details. He happens to be also very sensitive to, the different layers of light is something that I wasn't taught in architecture school. It came later just from instinct almost. And I think a lot of us as architects and designers work instinctively about light. This light feels good, this light feels bad. Why is there glare? How come I didn't think about that when I designed the breakfast nook? I feel like we fly blind a little bit. And part of the idea of this panel was to show you things that maybe you didn't know, or show you things that you could accomplish with lighting beyond merely lighting a beautiful material on the surface of a wall, or making up a decorative fixture that helps tell the story of the space. So then going on to Natalia and the very specific kind of different types of lighting projects, from the office for people in the nonprofit who are neurodivergent or suffer from migraines. That's a very specific clientele with a very specific approach to the lighting. But then to a cafe where, using circadian entrainment, everybody benefits from it. So how much do we know about that as designers when we're designing a cafe, unless the client is sort of saying to us, and this is really important to me. How, as architects, should we be saying, this is really important to you, and I have some understanding now of how I can do it. And then finally, with Erica, what I loved about your presentation was kind of the urgency about it. I mean, the fact that we kind of kick the can down the road in terms of lighting and make lighting levels during the day and night the same so that it's a one-to-one is a very easy fix, and one that probably most of us didn't even know we existed in that condition. I mean, personally, in my last job, my office had no natural light at all. It was in an interior design school, and it had no natural light at all. And I think, how damaged have I been over the last 4 years? Anyway, so I wanted to give you guys an idea of what the structure was about so that you could also formulate your own questions, and we could also dive a little bit deeper into the things that we talked about today. So, Erica, you actually answered one of the questions I had, which is that when you said that the wellness lighting is for everyone, I was going to ask you before whether, you know, this is the kind of application you see normally in schools or in, like you said, NICUs or hospitals or elder care facilities. I mean, where do you see this wellness application being used effectively already?
I should use this. That's a great question. It depends. So senior living, for sure, but it's a different challenge with senior living because you need a lot of, it's a more of a replacement, like a screw-in light bulb strategy, right? They don't really want dedicated screwed-in LED boards because the facilities people are, you know, Joe, who's worked there for 30 years, and he's not going to call Cooper Lighting when he needs a new light bulb. So, but they understand the value. I mean, so in senior living, it reduces nighttime falls, which in people over 80 is the leading cause of death, because once you fall down, then you're immobile, and then your likelihood for, you know, getting pneumonia and other things increases, and so it just is one of the leading causes to death. And on top of that, for Alzheimer's patients, it also helps them to sleep better. It consolidates their sleep at night, which means that the caregivers in the facility get more rest or up with the patients less, and it reduces agitation, sundowning syndrome. So, you know, there's less aggression on the patient side. So senior care, I've seen a lot of it. Education, actually, but it's a tricky thing because when wellness lighting first came out, people were like, I don't want to like dose my child, right? Children, yes, it's a very touchy subject. You don't want to mess with anybody's kids. But as the research has come out, I mean, providing more light during the day is not a bad thing for your brain. We are not getting enough light, daytime light signals to our brain. We're just not. And if you go for a 20-minute walk, so I used to live in San Diego. I moved back to New York 2 years ago. And I've heard a lot of people say here, well, I'm just going to go outside for 20 minutes and I'll be fine. You will be for like 15 minutes after that. It's an acute response. So the nice thing with, if you have a wellness task light or you have proper wellness daytime lighting, it's an acute response. For the time that you're around it, you will receive the benefits. Once you're not around it, it goes away. And it's the same thing with a walk in the morning. It's giving you a little jolt, but it's actually not going to sustain you. So corporate offices are such a good application for so many reasons, but a lot of employers don't want to do it just because it's the right reason. They want to see productivity numbers. But corporate environments, especially after COVID, and senior living and education, those are the top ones that I've seen.
Okay, great. And Natalia, do you find that there's like an increased understanding on the parts of the architects you work with that, you know, that they're aware of these, like the vertical lighting, that the light has to come into the eye and things like that? Or are you training?
I think there's still a lot of education to happen. So, yeah, I'm so glad that you're all here. I'm really happy to share this with you. So I hope you also become lighting missionaries and spread the message. But I think there's a growing awareness of the importance of lighting. And interestingly enough, it's also in the culture. Especially since the lighting researchers who developed the LED chip got a Nobel Prize a few years ago. There have been a lot of articles in the media, so there's public awareness. So we actually have some clients coming up to us asking, hey, this blue light stuff. Can we get some of it? And then we educate them on, what it really is and how we can provide better light quality and circadian supportive lighting in their offices. For instance, we had a client from Vermont with a small workshop where they make digital musical instruments come to me and say, hey, we have really long winter nights, short winter days and long dark evenings, and we want to do something for our staff that helps them just not feel like they're in a cave all winter long. So there's that, but I think a lot of those strategies are especially critical in cities like New York, where we have limited daylight access, like Erica mentioned. I was about to say a walk in the morning is enough, but thank you for updating me that it's not enough.
I think we were saying during our previous session too, that I think with COVID and everybody working from home, people's awareness of lighting has really, everybody's more aware of it, right? You all got the light to light you while you're on Zoom, and you're like, do I like the cool light or the warm light? And that's what a Kelvin is. So, I think that everybody's more aware of it, also more aware of health and the idea of being inside all the time during COVID, more aware of how to make an interior environment feel healthier and make you feel better in general.
If I can jump in again, and Jean showed a lot of great examples of subtle vertical lighting that isn't a crazy wash of a wall, but just a gentle hint that accents the space, but actually does quite a bit to help support that circadian lighting. We've done a number of calculations in offices and different kinds of settings where putting more light in the ceiling to put light on the horizontal uses a lot of wattage and doesn't actually help that much on the vertical level as trying to light the periphery a little bit more, or locating indirect lights or coves, or even just, again, aiming lights at the walls. That does an amazing amount, combination of that ambient and local task light. So I think
we do it because we care.
So, JG, do you want to talk a little bit about your own evolution using light too? Because the other day in the conversation, you said you feel very strongly about collaborating from the get-go, which was clear in your presentation.
I think the number one thing is to find the right partner to work with. I've been fortunate to work with Natalia and her boss Attila, who's not here today. I think he's traveling, right? They are an amazing firm. I'm just a shameless plug. Luminarc, they're really great. We've worked with a lot of lighting designers and a lot of very talented people. We had one, but collaborativeness is the fundamental of the game. And just I remember having, giving an RCP to a lighting designer, and then a month later they came back with something, said, this is our design. I said, I don't know what this is, it's just not working for me. We never had a conversation, it just did something, and we're really offended when we wanted to talk about it. Yep, we don't work with them. I love working with these, and everyone at Lumen is very incredibly technical and knowledgeable, but we can have a design conversation early at the get-go. And I'm not a lighting designer. I'm not going to pretend to be, but I'm very interested in it, and I like the results. So having somebody that you can have a dialogue with is critical. But I would kind of throw it back to some of the lighting designers. It's remember to you are in a collaborative work enterprise with a bunch of other people. We work most of our projects, and I don't know about you guys, but we have 5 to 20 different consultants to work with. It's great. I like that. I think it's great to be around a table and discuss this stuff, but you need this very evolved and intelligent approach to working together. And I love working with these guys. Actually, her boss I've never seen anyone draw so beautifully. It's just a pleasure.
So let's talk a little bit about actually controls and things like that, because when we talk about lighting and interiors and agency and equity and all those kinds of things, a lot of times you hear about equity in lighting in terms of exteriors or lighting, overlighting streets or overlighting parks that are in dangerous neighborhoods or something like that. But what about equity in the interior? How would we define equity in lighting in the interior? Would anyone like to? Are there examples you can think of for that?
There's actually an equity and lighting group, if you're interested to learn more. But I think the office project that I shared is maybe a good example of that, where we give occupants, staff, and people who are visitors to the space control over the lights, not just the task light, but also the general ambient light. And we find sometimes in spaces where somebody's new, if the lighting controls, how easily intuitive are they? Do you have the whole crazy panel, or is it just a simple, ceiling lights, raise and lower situation? So even that can do quite a lot to help empower people to just control their space.
Right, and that was one of the issues with the back of house things. Those spaces you're not able to control, and they either have poor lighting to begin with, or you can't vary the lighting per what you need at the moment.
Yeah, I would say, it's access, it's equal access to the potential, right? Some people are very sensitive to it, some people don't care, or in certain environments you're able to move around, right? Like, I've done tech company lighting design, and they have beautiful, like, hospitality type areas, breakout areas that people can sit. And in the hospital, you might not have control over your kitchen lighting, but kitchens are very, industrial kitchens have very specific light level requirements for safety. So meeting that, but also providing for them something that's going to help them feel more alert. There's so many studies out there that talk about the acute effects, like I said, of wellness and circadian lighting to improve focus, mood, alertness, reduce errors, so the chance that you might cut yourself while you're cooking. And in corporate environments, I think it is having that. I've worked with companies that provide a wellness stipend to their employees, and some of the bigger ones have fabulous wellness stipends that people use for gyms, but you could also use it for a wellness task light, right? So I think as architects and lighting designers, like, pushing outside of the boundaries of helping your client push outside of the boundaries of just like what's in the construction budget, and thinking about it as a holistic strategy is also something we have to consider, because I've worked with a lot of interior designers, and they pick out beautiful light fixtures, but really they're art that just happens to twinkle. And that FF&E budget is huge, but my lighting budget is usually very small. So if we could help the client to kind of massage how the lighting gets paid for, how it gets conceived of, is it part of a bigger wellness kickback that they're offering to their employees? That's where I think you get the equity for anyone and everyone.
Great. Okay. Was there anything else I was supposed to ask you before opening it up? Any other comments you have? Okay. So are there any questions from you guys, not only about the panel, but also if you did see the demonstrations, how those things applied today? Marianne?
I love the research. Not enough, never enough, right? It's always changing. But what are you defining as, sorry. What are you defining as a wellness task light, for example?
Sure. So what I didn't get into were the sort of nitty-gritty, how we measure. So equivalent melanopic lux and melanopic ratio are two of the circadian metrics that we use to evaluate light sources. You want something, so when I talk about a wellness task light, I'm talking about something that is a task light on your desk, or your work surface, designed to provide light at your eye in a comfortable way, and it would have the ability to have a high and also a low melanopic ratio, right? Because if it's a task light, you want to be able to use it to see at night, and also if you're working during the day. So those are the parameters, right? That's where I would want to stop, because I challenge all the lighting manufacturers to come out with innovative new. LED allows us to do so many interesting things, more than just squeeze LED boards back into incandescent or fluorescent task lights. Like, let's innovate,
Does a light like that have to literally, in order to get light into your eye, does it have to be shining into your eye or baffled, or how do you achieve
Right.
that?
So like a luminous globe, right? A luminous globe could work really well. The beauty of a task light is that you're bringing the light closer to your eye, which means by bringing it closer, you don't have to provide tons of light. It's already close to your face. So that's partly why it's such a great strategy and a comfortable strategy. what's in it and how the technology that's in maybe that diffuse globe. There's so many ways you could do it. You could do an indirect solution, but you'd have to use more energy and brighter LEDs, and so that's where the innovation would come from, right? Optics, and how do you make that comfortable, but by virtue of just bringing it closer to your face, you're already eliminating some of the hurdles that we have with it being in the ceiling or far away from you. So,
Does it have to be a certain, I'm going to say wavelength, but I'm not sure that's
like
correct.
a color temperature?
Yeah. Or I saw something about infrared lights, is that right? That also, this is a different thing where they, you know.
Infrared is usually for like cell regeneration and like healing. I know that's like a big thing on social media. But from a circadian standpoint, red is good for nighttime. Like it doesn't give your brain daytime signals at all. Blue in the 480, 490 region is the most potent, if you will. But there's so many ways you can get at it, really. And so it can be white. It could also be colored. But do people like having, a blue task light right next to their face all day long? Probably not. So that's where the innovation comes in, and testing and mock-ups, and just like you would in an architectural setting. You need to that is the beauty of light. It is a science, but it's also an art, and there's like the most magical things happen that are hard to predict because light is a tricky medium.
Okay. Other questions? The way in the back?
Ways in which you think are particularly effective for communicating the value of light to clients. I feel like lighting like acoustics can be quite challenging because of its intangibility.
So I think one of the best ways is just to show, not even tell. I love a good graph. I'm a nerd. I like reading research papers, but my clients don't necessarily, and that language doesn't translate to them. So the best thing to do is to bring a sample of lights or a demonstration, and this is where we work with our architectural lighting manufacturer partners, the reps. Sometimes they have showroom setups where they have things set up already, so we can show them in a more formal manner where they have actual fixtures installed in ceilings versus us holding wonky samples upside down or sideways. But that's showing samples and fixtures' capacity to dim or tune or change color really helps people understand, especially in context to just like on their own skin. Is the overall color quality good? Do they look and feel nice under that light? Is the particular finish that we're lighting, does it look good? Because sometimes from a photo that, for instance, an architectural partner has, a photo might not reflect light in the same way as the actual material itself because it might have a texture or quality. So it's really best to get the real objects together and to look at them with your collaborators.
I mean, I want to add to that. I mean, mock-ups are critical. If you're really interested in doing good lighting, you have to build mock-ups into the spec. It can't be a change order later. It can be expensive. It can be a process. We're working on a project right now in Soho with, a fairly good-sized building with a fairly large ground floor retail with a lot of brick. And we went back and forth in the design phase. We have a long, and the budget's good, but it's not like that good. It could be better. We have this long linear cove that's washing the brick, and I said, well, we've got a lot of display on here. I'm not really sure if we need the cove. Wow, we need the cove. We did a mock-up about 12 feet long with the boxes, with the retail portions to it, and yeah, we would have gone. I was pretty heavily against this cove, and it would have gone absolutely the wrong way. But especially for residential, the light color, the way you angle it, we use lighting to wash a whole center portion of a ceiling, and these, working with a good lighting designer, you get great data and photometric studies. It's very convincing looking, but until you do a mock-up, it really isn't. It's meaningful, but it's not 100% the story. You need to see the mock-up. I did one quick thing. I remember we did a project. I can't remember what, but there were two light coves, and we had a mock-up of an LED fixture in each one of them. And I said, wow, the one on the left is amazing like that. It's a great color, looks terrific. And the one on the right looks, frankly, looks kind of flat. Well, it turns out the one on the right, they had painted the cove what we'd asked them to do, and on the one on the left, they forgot to paint it. It was just plywood. So like this stuff has it's a huge impact, and these tiny little decisions in a cove where you're angling the fixture it's literally night and day. I mean, there's a huge range of things that happen when you move lights around in tight spaces. For another day, but mock-ups and put them in the spec. Like make a list, or it may or may not happen.
Yes.
I think we're probably all here because we love lighting. And I just want to, you go to a lecture and you have a take-home. There's always something you want to take home in your brain. And I would just like to commend your projects on the Suffolk and the residential stair, because what I'm taking home is, wow, the lighting on the curves. The way the lighting washed those curves was just phenomenal, and that'll be my take-home tonight.
Thank you so much. I couldn't do it without these guys.
Other?
I have a question maybe on a little different subject about color in lighting, because everybody try to work with the color and make it very smooth. But what about like strong color, blue or orange? What role it makes or does in our everyday life and being in architecture object or interior? Can you elaborate on that subject?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
With LEDs and color, it's actually kind of challenging. There have been a lot of more advancements in continuity and quality in white LED chips for white lighting, but there's still quite a bit of variation in colored chips. I think it's gotten a lot better in the last few years, but I remember an installation we had that did have color changing, and when we had yellow chips in particular were bad. We had a yellow scene, and some of the fixtures look quite green, some yellow, some bluish, so it was a little bit of a color issue. I think, and there's a couple of aspects to this. There's the consistency, which is slowly improving. There's the cost, because you do have an added cost typically if you have a color changing fixture. And then also a solution, I think John's projects do that beautifully, where it's done more affordably with paint. Like you said in the cove scenario where one cove wasn't finished, you can actually use colored finishes to bounce light and bring color into the space through the finishes versus the color. I find colored lighting, I guess in our industry, at least in the US, it's gone in the way of looking a little bit entertainy. Architainment, maybe reserved for facades and just a few select things. So we haven't done too much color except for special features. I don't know about.
My kids love it. When they were little, they went on Amazon, got all these colored tape LEDs. They turned their room purple. They just freaking love it. But let's go. But like I'm going to once say, and this is maybe a little less lighting, just architecture in general. But go really old school and talk about affordable. Look at I was just looking at a book of Barragan's, right? You just put a yellow glass strip in a bunch of windows. And you say, well, why does he use yellow? Yellow made him happy. He likes yellow. Yellow's great, and you walk in that corridor, and the yellow makes you happy. There's no way not to be happy in that space. So in these sort of very tightly controlled areas, and he used obviously a lot of different colors, they're amazing. And it's just like it's a piece of glass, right? You don't have to use fancy lights either, but the way you bring the light in, Mexico helps. It's way more light. It's profound. I mean, it's like the best kind of architecture. Or, think about Scarpa. Well, they're on the water, which we may be under also, but, the way he used reflected materials to bring light in and how he used materials to reflect things into the space, it's genius. I mean, it's really, you have to be there. You have to live a space. You have to know your space. And those are two pretty easy examples because they're amazing, but there are a lot of non-lighting things you can do too.
Yeah, I think be careful. I think saturated light is so beautiful when it's done in alignment, like Louis Barragan is, you know, that's its own, like you said, that's understanding the the daylight quality in Mexico. But in the projects where we've had colored lighting, we always try to keep it really tight with the concept of the project, and that might even mean eliminating all options. So you don't get a Valentine's Day, Christmas, and sometimes you do, which is not the preferred option. Sometimes people ask for that, but I think saturated light in an artistic and tasteful way, if it's congruent with the concept of the project and the ethos of the project, then it makes sense, and it can be really delightful, right? Those are the moments. I mean, theatrical lighting is so beautiful in the way that it can really cause you to feel and in such a, you know, in a fixed setting. So I'm still all for saturated light, but be careful who's programming it or how much control they have over it.
Actually, the one image I actually forgot we had, I skipped over. There was a light fixture on, I think, that side. It was for a sizable vestibule to a townhouse on the Upper East Side, and it was like a 2-year project. It was during COVID. We had, you know, a little extra staff, and we had a great client who was willing to entertain this thing. But we made these series of keep going. You want more? Nope. Yeah, forward. Yeah, look for these giant floating balls.
The
Wait.
light fixture?
That one. All right,
Sorry.
that guy on the left. That's a, you know, from here to about here size chandelier. We made it in London with Charles Burnand. The idea was to have these marbleized globes, you know, kind of floating in air. Each one has one cable exactly. There's a whole armature inside. I don't know how many thousands of LEDs. That we actually had the guy who does some of the lighting programming from the Glastonbury Festival in England. It was insane. Yeah, I'm not going to say the price was like, you know, I almost had my head chopped off. But to your point, I'm bringing this for a point. The idea was you're in this vestibule, this very serious townhouse, and this thing was above you, and you could program it so that it would float, right? That the light would float through it like a little bit of a cloud formation.
Look, I'm doing it.
Oh, you got the, oh yeah, cool, you got to work. All right, yeah, well, that thing, that was in prototype mode. That you would make this thing where the lights would subtly shift and change, and I don't know, maybe it was a little intimidating, you know, like you look up, you're like, whoa, it's moving. It was a fun piece, but of course, like, what the client figured out, the client was a guy who knew how to program things. What he figured out is like, he could do like lightning mode, he could turn it, you know, green for St. Patrick's Day, and he'd like impress his friends, and we're like, sure, you know, there's versions of this where it looks like a clown, you know, be really careful, you know. And I was like, I just want this soft, quiet, white, floating light, and then it's just like flashing green, you know, like there's a leprechaun in there. So it was, that was an interesting, that was interesting. But yeah, so but color, super dangerous.
I guess it's like with highlighters. Once you have one, everything.
Yeah,
Gets,
right. Once you have it,
good.
you don't stop using it. You're
I
really
wanted
careful.
to say though, the Barragan thing is also interesting because you're talking about vertical surfaces, Natalia, and when you treat that entire vertical surface almost, you know, it's one bright color in Mexican sunlight, yes, but you know, you're treating the whole wall as almost like a light fixture by just reflecting light off of it, and then that color is what gives it character.
Yeah, and I think some light fixture manufacturers try to do this, where they'll have a fixture with white light, but the interior reflector will be a color, whether maybe champagne, blue, red, yellow, but that actually does a lot to kind of change the feel of the space as well, even though it's just located within that small element.
Mock-ups. You really don't know a gold reflector from a white from a silver till you try it. I mean, if any of you know, great. I don't. I mean, like, you have to mock this stuff up.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, in the back there, someone.
Hi, you said Barragan, he's like my favorite of all time. So, can you talk a little? I'm interested in shadow now, because I'm sorry I was late, so I hope I didn't miss much on shadow. But how do you think about that? Do you think about that? And yeah, I'd love to hear.
All the time. Dark spaces are amazing. I mean, I'm going to go to the cliche In Praise of Shadows. If you hadn't read it, it's worth reading. It's a very anti-Western. It's a little militant anti-Western. It's an interesting tone. He says, in the Western world, you just blanket everything with light, and it's just terrible. You need shadows, you need darkness, you need the contrast. And I was actually just looking at something. It was a Japanese project, and just, yeah, there's something insane, unbelievably compelling about that. And I'm really glad you asked that question. We don't talk about that much, right? What is an appropriate dark space? We're trained to think like, no, everything needs some lighting, but does it? You know, there's a limit to that.
Well, and there's a wellness component to that as well, right? I mean, can you guys speak to that your eye needs to have the
Yeah.
darkness?
contrast as
Yeah, I mean, the 25 to 1, I mean, that's a biological thing, but it also can absolutely happen, right, from lights being on to being in a dark room or a dim room, and your body needs that. We crave it, right? There's so many things about what we're drawn to with light that, with natural light, that, yes, should be applied in electric lighting strategies, and darkness is critical to light even, right? You can't perceive light without darkness, so it very much is a part of how you design.
And just picked, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. I was just going to reference a friend of mine. He's a researcher and educator in Europe, and he was looking into old standards for lighting. And right now, the average recommended light level is about 30-foot candles for offices and around 100-foot candles for factory spaces, where you need, acute vision to, when they're moving objects or if you're doing fine work. And about 100 years ago, the standard recommendation was about 10-fold lower. So our accommodation, our cultural accommodation to what we need is very different, because biologically it's totally different, because our bodies haven't evolved that quickly. We're still the same people as we were 100 or 1,000 years ago, more or less. So it's interesting how that changes. So it's
cultural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But picture, I was at DIA yesterday in Beacon, right? DIA has these great, super dark spaces. To your point, what makes some of the Richard Sayre room on the lower level, what makes that incredible? So you have these super high windows, it's hitting the sculptures in this really interesting angle, and it's kind of dark, but that's what makes it so great. Like, I do a lot of photography. I wouldn't go in there without taking a picture of something. I mean, just like the light and shadow is really what turns me on. Or just think of, I remember we were years ago rented an Airbnb that was like a little chateau and had these super deep walls, right? These 2 to 3 foot thick walls with these punched openings. It's the most beautiful light you can imagine. You just have like this shaft of light coming through it. There's a sense of darkness, but you can open the door and go outside, but you know the light is there. But it's critical. We really don't think about that. I mean, maybe I think a little bit about it, but I don't think we think about it day to day in the way we should.
We should probably wrap it up, but I was going to say, I think it's also a cultural thing in that, bright light is a modernity also, or a bright office space. You think of the illuminated ceilings and SOM projects, and it sort of is saying, this is what's modern, this is what's clean, this is what's contemporary and what's elevated. And then it becomes kind of subsumed into our whole system of value of light, like bright light is good, white light is good, and other, darkness is dangerous. Darkness is, but it's also mysterious and poetic, so we have to get that balance back. Do you want, Erica, did you want to say something? Okay, Natalia, I did cut you off. Anything else? No, okay. So it's 7:25, which means that we also have, if you were not able to get to one of the demonstrations, now you can do that. Now the demonstrations are in 3 places. Jason is in the back there talking about color and CRI. Bridget is over here talking about circadian something.
Should we be talking about spectrum, color temperature?
Okay. And Sean, this room is? Glare. Great. So thank you all very much for coming, and please stay. And